Hi, I'm Delilah, aka Assassina-san, and I'm joined by my friend Ryan Cahill.
Hello.
We met through New York City Gamer Society, which is a Facebook group dedicated to New York City gaming, but there's also people from all over the world there. And we actually met in person right before COVID happened, and we had a really good chat in a really cool restaurant, Mom's. Shout outs. Hope that place is still doing good despite the situation. And the reason why I'm doing this today, this isn't like any like podcast series or anything. It's just two friends bullshitting, and Ryan specifically has a lot of knowledge in mythology, and we're going to be talking about, well, not we, mostly she. I'm just here to learn. She's going to be the one teaching everything. Norse mythology in relation to God of War, the new 2018 God of War game, not the first one. And the reason why we decided to do this is because, one, I'm going to be doing a podcast with Dead Cell Media, which is my monthly spoilercast podcast where we pick a game every month. And we're going to be picking God of War, and we're recording that tomorrow. So I'm going to be taking everything I learned from Ryan and sourcing her in that podcast tomorrow and linking this little conversation in that podcast. And she's just going to teach me a lot of shit that I know nothing about, except God of War. I know about God of War, but she knows about the mythology, because you apparently were like, you grew up around books of mythology, right? Like that was your
Yeah, that was
upbringing.
kind of my upbringing. My mom decided it would be a fun idea to see what would happen if she tried to read me a book of Greek mythology for my bedtime stories. um, and it wasn't any of that like kiddie, like watered down stuff that you see a lot. It wasn't Delaires, if anyone read those book series as a kid. They're really great, but they're very condensed. And she was she wanted to see what would happen if like I was exposed to literature.
Mm,
And it I got hooked. I really did. I wanted more. We went through all of Greek mythology and the Roman counterparts, then moved on to Norse mythology pretty quickly afterwards, and then Egypt, Asia,
that's
Africa, North
dope.
America. I wanted all of it. Um,
Hell
like if
yeah.
there's a reason I didn't have like too many friends as an adolescent, because like everybody's reading Teen Vogue and I'm over here reading Gilgamesh, and they're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Oh, this is like a really long poem that was written by the Sumerians." And they're like, "Who the fuck was that?
Wow.
You're weird. Go away." um, so it I was definitely that nerd kid for my entire life, but it served me pretty well, especially when the God of War games came out. I was really taken with how they approached Greek mythology, and then seeing all the promos and teasers for the one in 2018, I was so psyched because it looked really good. It just looked beautiful, and the fact that they were going to tackle Norse mythology was like I was sold, because seeing how they did it with the Greek mythology and how they really kind of brought a new perspective to it, I was really looking forward to seeing how they would do that with the new technology at their disposal for storytelling.
Oh yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you about this because I know very little about it, and most of what I know is from video games, not books. So I feel like I'm talking to an expert right now, or actually I am, because you grew up with this and you've studied it and you're really into it. So I would say you are an expert. So
Well, thank you.
I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off right now and ask one question, and then I'll let you like take it in whatever direction you want. Did you know, based on your knowledge, that Artreus was Loki? I should have warned about spoilers. I'll just put like I'll edit something
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah, I knew. I knew pretty early on. I'd say I figured and put the pieces together probably after the meeting with Freya.
Mm,
Um, like by that point, I kind of knew the major plot points. When the stranger, who is revealed to be Balder, first shows up at the house, um, there were a couple of things that just kind of struck me about him, and looking back now, you can kind of see how different he is from the other characters we're presented with. Um, Although the Vikings were very warlike people and had some pretty ferocious weapons, the fact that he was not using anything other than his fists, wasn't wearing armor, showed that he really didn't have any fear of any injury. And it's like, why would I bother with a sword when I could just use my bare hands? Because one of us is going to give, and it ain't going to be me. Um, and right when he said, I can't feel any of this, that was the big light bulb, like, oh, okay, that's why. Well, how are we going to resolve this? Because if he can't die, then how do you win? And the fact that it was a three wave fight and the cinematics
Oh
were
my
just
god.
so pretty. Oh my god. That was
Good.
that, talk about ripping off a band-aid. Um that's probably the best introduction to what we were going to be dealing with for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Because you think that first fight with the troll, you think that's kind of like, okay, this is indicative of what the game's going to be, and then you come back to the house and it's like, no, no, it's way worse.
Yep. Yeah.
um Balder as a character is really interesting, and I think they portrayed him really well. They presented him well. Um, the source material that we have for Norse mythology, there's like two main sources. There's the Eddas. There are two different ones. There's the Poetic Edda, which was a collection of epic poems that contained some of the richest stories of Norse mythology and cosmology, and it's probably the best resource we have. Um, and then after that, we have the Prose Edda, that, in terms of quantity, has the most amount of information. And that was compiled and written by an Icelandic scholar named Snorri Sturluson, kind of as a type of textbook, actually, on the Norse faith, amazingly. Um, and he did make use of the Poetic Eddas for his research, along with other poems and folk tales, some of which have been lost to time. Like, we can't just go find them. Um, but there were a couple of stark differences between his take on some of the characters, and other representations of them. Snorri was kind of coming at it from the point of view of Christianity, and kind of trying to, I would say, reconcile the two faiths. So that colored a lot of what he did when he interpreted. He made a lot of assertions of the situation. And modern scholars now kind of argue about just how reliable he was, mainly because of his depiction of Balder. In the story as he presented it, Balder was this, like, you could not say a bad thing about Balder. Balder was this golden boy. Everyone loved him. Everyone would smile, including the earth he walked on. Um, but there was a prophecy that he would suffer a very tragic death, and his mother, Frigg, did not wish for this to happen. So she went to everything under creation and got a promise from them that they would never harm him. And she applied those promises to him. And so he was protected. And all the gods made this like big show of like throwing things at him and hitting him with stuff, and it would just all bounce off, and everyone was having a good time. Um, and then we have Loki show up, um, and he found the one thing by disguising himself and going to Frigg as an old woman and saying, "Well, you couldn't possibly have gotten everything. Like, you must have missed something." And she said, "Well, mistletoe is so small and pretty and harmless. I didn't even bother asking it. Let's forget for a moment how poisonous mistletoe actually is. Um, it's highly toxic, um, but
Good to know.
it's cute and pretty. So I guess, um, so he decided, just for giggles, apparently, to get Balder's brother, who was blind, Hod, who was kind of standing off because he couldn't see, so he was just listening. He brought Hod a spear that he had kind of fashioned out of mistletoe and said, "It's okay, I'll help you partake in the festivities. I'll guide your arm. And when I tell you to go, you let loose." So he did. And the spear pierced Balder's heart, and he fell dead immediately. And all the gods were very upset, of course, and they all kind of knew what had happened. They figured because Loki was known for this kind of mischievous, if not outright insidious behavior. Um, and they tried to get Baldur's soul back from the underworld, from hell. And she said, "Okay, well, you say everybody loved him so much. Well, then you have to get everyone and everything to attest to that and cry for him, and then I will release him back to the world of the living." So they got everybody except one troll who's, when they came to her, she said, "I didn't care much for him. He didn't do anything for me. Let hell keep what she has." So he remained in the underworld, and it was speculated that that was probably Loki as well in disguise. Um, Aside from that,
Wow.
Loki actually isn't that bad a person. He's actually saved the day for the gods in many other stories, and most of his stuff is just harmless trickery. Um, though he never actually did have, as far as we can tell by the records, a following of people like the other gods did. He was not actively worshipped, from what we can ascertain.
Mm.
Um, there are other versions, though, of Baldur's story that paint him very differently as this kind of belligerent fighter, which is how they chose to present him in God of War. I think it was a smart choice on
Mm.
Santa Monica's part, um, because it really isn't very fitting of a Viking to be this kind of meek and mild person. They all had a ferocity to them in their culture. Um, but right when we were presented with him too, the fact that he's covered in all of these tattoos,
Mhm.
um, and no one else that we see really has that amount of ink on them. Um, I thought that was a really good way of visually representing all of the various sigils and spell work that Freya would have done on him to protect him. And I thought it was nice that they basically turned him into a sociopath.
Yeah.
Because there are people in the world that actually they're born with the inability to feel pain, and it does turn them into kind of disturbed individuals
Mm.
because they really can't feel anything. And I think they handled the mental aspect of what that could do to somebody very, very well.
Right. So thinking about the first version of Baldur that you described versus this one and how it relates more closely to God of War. In the beginning of playing, when you were first introduced to Baldur, did you think for a second that he might have been Loki?
For a brief moment, yes, the red hair had me going, because that is supposed to be a classic thing, a classic characteristic. This Thor as well was supposed to be a redhead. Marvel changed the image of both of them um, to be very different. And I know a lot of people, their knowledge of Norse mythology is really based on the Thor comics, which is
Hey.
actually like it's it's not that bad actually. They did incorporate a lot of stuff. Um, and I thought the idea of taking back the cosmology that the Norse had basically invented for themselves, of different worlds being layered on top of each other, that's kind of a theory that is part of physics today. So they were pretty ahead of the curve on that. Um, I'd say they were very good philosophers in that aspect.
Gotcha. And so way back when I finished God of War in 2018, I was listening to spoilercast from Cory Barlog, who was the main director of this game, and he said that when he first started writing God of War, he he was writing the second game. He was writing the sequel to it because it was focusing more on the Norse mythological characters that you're describing, and I'm sure a lot more that we didn't even talk, that you didn't even talk about. And he said he had to just push that aside and say, no, this is gonna be God of War 2. Like we need to focus on Atreus and Kratos' story and kind of this father son relationship. So based on like that knowledge and your knowledge of Norse mythology, what do you predict God of War 2 will be about? Like we know we saw Thor at the end. We know Loki is Atreus. We know that there was this weird cryptic symbol on the wall that were created by the giants who were the prophets in God of War that maybe shows that Atreus kills Kratos. But it's not clear because it's a symbol,
It's
it's a
not
drawing.
clear, and they're definitely deviating, which I love, from the original mythology now. They're in the process of creating their own mythos around it. They've set the stage, um, and now they're gonna jump off it. Interesting thing though, we see this kind of image of what appears to be Jormungandr, the world serpent, coming out of Atreus's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And Loki is the father of Jormungandr. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to mean sex. That can mean a whole bunch of different things. It could easily mean magic. It could have been a ritual. Who the heck knows? But it would explain why Faye would have told Atreus that he was friendly, because what they did tell us is that he has seen Ragnarok and then was thrown backward in time. So he's probably met them before.
Well, yeah, when we first see the snake recognizes Atreus. He's like, huh, curious. But then that was it. Then we see that
Yeah,
mural, and that was it.
yeah. They're really covering it up really well. What I liked to I am not really good on reading the old runes. That is something I have not really endeavored yet, but other people
Yet, she
have.
says.
And there, yes, yet. No. We'll get there, I'm sure. Um, but I did work on looking around seeing if anyone else had thought to try to translate the runes, and several people did. And we see that Kratos is referred to as Fabauti, who is Loki's father in the mythology. And it does make sense, to have that relationship there. And I'm curious to see how they're going to handle this, because it almost appears like Kratos dies. Maybe Atreus is trying to save him.
Hmm.
For all we know, he could turn Kratos into Jormungandr. I mean, after all, they both have
Oh,
beards, right?
what? Let's go.
I'm curious to see how they're gonna do it. There's also been some speculation that Kratos might be Tyr, which would play into, God of War, after all, is what the game is called.
Hmm.
Um, and the idea of him kind of going around as this like ambassador God of War would tie into kind of his redemption arc that he seems to be going
Mm.
through as a character. So I want to. I don't know. Have they issued a release date at all,
No, they
or like?
haven't even announced it, but we know because there's a few realms in God of War that we could not visit,
Yeah.
and we know there's a sequel. We haven't heard when. We haven't heard that it's like it wasn't officially announced. We just know it's happening.
Yeah, I figure Asgard is probably going to be one of the last places we would go,
Hmm.
because that seems like there's going to be a showdown. There's
Oh
always a
yeah.
showdown when you go to the home of the gods, and uh, Vanaheim um, seems to have been locked off as well by the gods. That seems to be more to do with Freya, than anything else.
Oh.
Freya and Frigg being the same person pissed off a few people. Um, I knew some folks that said that's not how it's supposed to be.
Mm.
Um, but actually, they are the same person. What they said in the the context of the game was not untrue. Frigg does mean beloved. It would make sense that it was a pet name. The name for this goddess really is fascinating because Freya doesn't actually act as a name, it just means lady. And Frey means lord. So they are the lady and the lord, it's titles. Aristocratic women in Norse society were commonly called Freyr, meaning the women, not to be confused with Frey or Freyr. The pronunciations are really hard to tack down, and sometimes people get those two things mixed up.
Mm.
But Frey or Freyr was the brother's name, and he does supposedly reside in Alfheim, so that little touch as well with the elves was accurate. Where he went, I don't know. They that's clearly another arc of the game that they're waiting to reveal to us.
Gotcha. And once again, I know nothing about this mythological stuff. It's all very fascinating to me. I've already learned so much, but I think about Freya as a character and the last thing that she said to Kratos after he killed Baldur, and it was a threat. She was like, first she blew his spot about being the ghost of Sparta, which good on her. Like, you know, he
Yeah,
was mad about
talking
her
about calling
lying
him
about
out.
being a god this whole time, but he was lying to his own son. And when he came out
Exactly.
to Atreus and told him that he's the ghost of Sparta, just the music that plays, the same music
Mm.
when Kratos had to go back and get his blades of chaos, which was such a good moment.
Oh, that was so epic.
Yeah, it made me wonder, like, what the fuck is Freya gonna do? She's powerful. She's gonna do some shit.
She was notorious even in the mythology as being a wielder of the satyr magic, which is a real thing. It was kind of a way of manipulating, like, first you could see and divine the future, but its core really was a way of knowing and manipulating fate and weaving new events into the fabrics of destiny, which would explain how she was able to revive Mimir. She
Mm.
just played around with reality. Um, and she gets downplayed sometimes because, the nature goddess, the fertility goddess, oh, so soft and delicate, um
God forbid.
but she really wasn't. She was a Wolwa, which would be spelled Volva,
Wow. Say
a
that
type
so
of
well.
shaman. Um, and shamanism was a big thing in Norse mythology. Sh- She is attributed to having been the one who taught Odin a lot of the satyr magic. The only reason he's as powerful at it as he is because she taught him.
Mm.
Um,
Take that,
and
Odin.
she taught him because they were married. A proto goddess that kind of predates Frigg, that was also named Freya, was the wife of a god that also predates Odin named Od.
Oh wow.
Um, Odr. So Oder. But how do I say this? There, Od, Oder and Odin are the same word. The in on Odin is just a way of masculinizing, making the word a masculine word. So they've been married since like the Germanic migration period. Um, and the idea of them like having this falling out, I kind of like too, because Odin really was just a power hungry, knowledge hungry person, even in the mythology. Um, he always was looking to become bigger and better than everybody else because he didn't trust anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably how they would have separated. He didn't really put that much faith in her after the end, got what he wanted and was like, I don't need you anymore. Um, it's pretty brutal, and they're doing a good job of painting him as a jerk, like a serious bastard. Um, but there's bigger problems right now. Because she can hate him all she wants, but Odin didn't kill her baby.
No.
I can't wait to see her fury.
Yeah.
It is hinted at the end. Did you defeat all the Valkyries?
Yes.
So you saw that little bit at the end that would in reference to her.
Oh God, it's been so long.
Like we're led to believe that like we kill the Valkyrie Queen, but there's another woman
Oh,
behind them.
yes, 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 yes. Now I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. That again is a deviation from the mythology. But
Okay.
I think it works really well. Especially with how they presented her as a person, as this really strong woman, who's not gonna take anything lying down.
Okay. See, I had got caught up so much in the combat of the Valkyries because they were a pain in the butt,
They
especially the
suck.
queen. That I like completely forgot the little story beat that came out of it. So that's good. I'm glad you refreshed my memory on that.
Yeah, they're so hard. Oh,
Yeah.
hours that I will
Mm-hmm.
never get back.
Yeah, exactly. I usually don't bump difficulties down, and I think I did just fight the last Valkyrie.
Yeah, they're just hard. They're impossible.
Yeah.
That's like who needs hard mode when you've got them?
Yeah.
Um, I haven't tried the new game plus yet because I'm just terrified. Um,
Yeah, I
I'm just
haven't
like I'm
either.
gonna go in there and get wrecked on like the first Draugr that I meet.
Nice. Um, I was under the impression this whole time that I mean, it is like that, I think, but maybe you can speak more to the actual source. I thought that Freya did not want to marry Odin, but she did it just to protect her people. And the only good thing
Yeah,
she got out of it was Baldur.
yeah. Um, like he clearly like was doting on her and trying to like give her all these pet names and like put up this facade that everything was cool. But it definitely wasn't. Her and her brother coming to Asgard, it was basically part of a peace treaty. Even in the original
Yeah.
mythology, they were at war.
Oh.
So they in some versions they came kind of as an exchange of prisoners.
Mm,
Um, and in others they came as ambassadors, to reside and have a seat at the table with the Asgardians.
I see.
But it was always tenuous, and they didn't really get into it all that much,
Mm,
in the mythology or in the game. Obviously, I'd like to see if they expand on it more if they were to introduce Frey.
mm,
Maybe we get more information. They were supposed to have come along with their father as well, Njord, who was a an ocean god, but he hasn't been mentioned. So maybe they just axed him. I'm
gotcha.
not sure. Um, but I'm looking forward to seeing how they will handle that.
Nice. And I guess I'll ask one more thing and then I'll let you kind of speak to what you want to speak to and I'll like won't ask anything else unless a question sprouts from what you're saying. Um okay. So uh sorry. I'll totally edit out all these uhs. All the uhs. Um okay. Who is your favorite Norse character that was represented in God of War, but in the mythological sense, like not in God of War.
Jeez.
And then who is your favorite in God of War, whether it's related to the mythology or not,
Oh boy. That's hard. That's like trying to pick like which of your kids do you like the best?
or just standouts, I guess.
There, there. As far as the people who are represented, and um, I've always had a thing for trickster gods. So Loki fascinated me as a character very early on because he's not really evil.
Mm.
No trickster god is evil. Um, but they definitely like to test boundaries. So as a character, I always really liked him, and the antics that he would get into. Um, and I would say, who else would be like who would be second? Um, there's so many characters
Mm.
that they actually did touch on, but yeah, I think I always liked Freya. I liked the other aspects of her. The ritual magic of Seder was always
Yeah.
fascinating. Um, all magic really in older mythologies is really it's all ritualistic and shamanistic, and I thought they did a good job of representing her. She did not have a turtle house. They just made that up,
It looked
but I
cool.
loved it.
Yeah.
It was the best thing. I want to live in that turtle house. So I thought they did a really good job of bringing out just how nature oriented she is, but also this witchy side to her when you're inside and you see all this like stuff hanging from her ceiling and everything. Um, I thought they really captured like, yeah, what does a hedge witch look like? And that's what it should look like. In all of mythology, just in general,
Mhm.
there's so many people. I loved I loved the Jotun just as a group of people. Because they weren't like giants didn't have to be big. Um
Yeah, which
there
this
were
game
different ways
proves.
to be big. Yeah, there's different ways to be big. And that was represented very well in the mythology. That they're not all human like. Some of them are like animals, like Jormungandr, um, and some of them are like Loki, relatively normal looking with
Yeah.
special abilities and gifts. And they were all highly intelligent people, very advanced intellectually.
Yeah, they freaking
I
told the whole
really
story of God of War.
right? Like they called it. Those
Yeah.
people are smart. Um,
Yeah.
um, and I liked how they made them mysterious in the game. Um, that they're all gone, and they were like treated really badly in the mythology too. Like they were stomped on all the time. Um,
Yeah.
it was not pretty. Um, so to have them kind of just be absent and this like strange thing behind the curtain that we don't see um is really interesting when we finally get there and there's nobody, like they're
Yeah.
all gone, and all that's left behind is the histories that they recorded,
Mm.
um which I think is very representative of how whenever we look back on these stories, those people are not there anymore. Um, the people who wrote those stories are gone, and what we have might be kind of incomplete and cryptic, much like the murals and mosaics we saw on their walls in the game. Um, there's a lot that's just lost to time, and we're left to interpret.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see what
Yeah,
they're
totally.
gonna have in store for us.
I'm so when they announced God of War 2, I'm gonna flip my shit.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
so
I'm
excited.
I'm gonna whatever like teaser or whatever it is that they're gonna do, I'm gonna watch that like 200 times or something. I'm just gonna be like, yeah, okay, it's a slow day of work. Let's look at this again, and try to find all the Easter eggs.
Yeah.
They did put a lot of Easter eggs in God of War, like funny little things. Did you catch any of like the pop culture references that they put in there?
I don't think so, not that I remember. but I'm sure if you mention something, it might be like, oh yeah. Because like I
There
said, I
was
haven't played it since
I
2018, but
yeah,
I
I
was
think it was
rewatching cutscenes to like refresh my memory for the
I don't think
podcast.
it was Brock. I think it was Sindri. A conversation with him where like Thanos' gauntlet gets referenced,
Oh yeah, wasn't
which was
there?
adorable. They did a lot of Marvel kind of stuff. There's when they're fighting the two Grendel trolls in I think that was in Tears. I think that was one of the tier dungeons where there's those two giant trolls you got to fight that are both called Grendel, which is another great reference to Beowulf.
Oh cool.
Um, there's a conversation, like a brief conversation in the cutscene between Kratos and Atreus, where he says, what is that quote? I think I've got it somewhere because I just loved it so much I saved it somewhere. Because it was just so cute. Where he makes the same quote. He quotes the Hulk, um, which was just so silly. Um, where is it? Yeah, there we go. Um, when yeah, the Ash and Frost, that's them. Kratos has been bigger, and he has. He fought the Titans, so yeah. And Atreus says, "Heh, puny troll," which is a
Ah,
reference to what the Hulk says in Avengers after smashing Loki like all those times.
wow, I did not
So it's
catch
kind of
that
funny that
one.
Atreus is Loki, and he makes that reference. I thought it was so
That
brilliant.
is
It's
so
so silly.
clever. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I remember the Infinity Gauntlet. I think it was also an armor piece, wasn't it? That you
Yes,
could
I think it
use?
was something
Yeah,
that you
that I
could actually
remember.
get.
Yeah, but oh, that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, there's all kinds of weird things, and they did a lot of nods to the mythology itself. Those doors to the hidden chambers,
Mhm.
um, where you find the Valkyries, where you have to use the chisel to kind of like pop through in just the right spots.
Mhm.
In that brief moment when all of the ice disappears and Kratos is going to open the doors, there's this beautiful symbol, this large sigil that's on those double doors, and that's actually the Helm of Awe. Um, why it's called that actually isn't important, because that's a whole other story. But its name is Aegishjolmir, um, and it you only see it for a second, so you kind of have to like pause or like take a picture, like screen capture to see it clearly. But it actually has a long history of being associated with protection and resilience against one's enemies. Um, and the original meaning of Hjalmar, the second half of the word, is covering. And it is covering the doors with that ice. There's these branching arms. There's 8 of them surrounding a circle, and those arms are made up of 2 runes. The Y-shaped ones at the ends. Um, the original name of them is actually not known, but we commonly refer to them now as algiz or algiz. Um, Anybody who likes runes will know what I mean. And that is attributed to protection. And the straight lines that are heading back on those arms towards the center are crossed by a series of lines running perpendicular. And those are the Isa runes, most likely. And Isa translates to ice. So we have a covering of protection of ice over the door. So again, referencing the ritual type of magic that they would have used, you've got the tracing of this sigil that would then conjure this protective ice that only could be broken through with the special chisel. I thought that was a really nice touch of
Who
storytelling.
knew one simple mechanic had so much depth?
They have really. This is why I love Santa Monica so much. is that they really put so much effort into this. They didn't have to do that. Like they
Yeah.
really didn't have to think it through that far. But they wanted to bring something really authentic. And I know in a lot of the interviews, Corey Barlog had said that he really wanted to do this right, and I think they really did. Um, they did wonderful visual representations everywhere. Um, my first hint about Freya being Freya, because it's not revealed who she is until later, although people probably could have guessed.
Yeah.
Um, but the first hint was the boar,
Mm.
um, a symbol of the Vanir uh, gods was the boar. Like they would charge in to battle on the backs of boars. Um, and I'm kind of curious if that boar, because she says it's the last of its kind, and that he doesn't really remember who he was, if that's her brother,
Oh.
because he's missing. Um, and then we've got a boar who just happens to not know who they used to be. Like, hmm,
Oh, wow.
the plot thickens.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I have
Yeah,
nothing
they
good
did
to
they
add
did
to
all
that.
kinds of little things like that. They did all kinds of stuff like that throughout. And I think that was a really like that showed a lot of respect for the source material and also for their audience. Like there are those of us who wouldn't catch all that stuff because they're not crazy like me. Um, um, but for those crazy people like me and the crazy people out there who decided to try to decipher the runes on all of the walls and the placards that you would open up in those places, those lore markers, um, for people who were that devoted, they were not going to be disappointed. There was
Mm.
never any gibberish anywhere. It all meant something.
Wow.
And that speaks to how much they really care about their audience.
That's great. Wow.
Yeah, I just love them.
I feel like we could end there, but is there anything else that stands out to you with comparison from the game to the mythology that you feel like you want to talk about before we end?
Man, I mean there's tons of stuff,
Yeah.
but that could all be we could all do that at a different time. Those other finer details, I think.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we dealt with like the big meat of it,
Yeah.
those main characters.
Yeah. Cool. And is there any like for someone interested in mythology, like Norse mythology specifically, uh, in relation to God of War, is there any required reading that you would recommend?
Yeah, there's oh man, okay.
If you want,
So
okay, you do know it off the top of your head because I was gonna say if
yeah,
you don't, you can
there's
give me a
some
list and I
really
can put it in the description if
there's
that's
some
easier.
there's some really good ones. I actually have a couple of them here. This is a really good one. Let me see if I can make sure that I've got it in the frame. This
Ooh,
um
Gods and Myths of Northern Europe.
by H.R. Ellis Davidson. She was a brilliant scholar and a professor, and she presents it in a way that, although it's academic, um, it's not a slog. Like it's very approachable. Um, Anything she's written, I would say, is a very good adaptation on who these people were, you know, in the mythology and the ideals and philosophies that the mythology represented. Another really good one um, that I really liked was The Viking Way by
Mm,
Daniel McCoy. You see, I've got a bunch of markers in it
I
right
love
now.
it.
He's another crazy devoted person like myself, and he takes down a lot of the pieces, the working pieces in Norse mythology, outlines that, and then goes to the myths themselves, so that you have a better working knowledge going in to the stories before you just jump right in. And of course, anyone who is going to do this needs to read the Poetic Edda, and then definitely read the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson. Um, Got to take it with a grain of salt because it was written by someone who was trying to make it more appealing to the newer religion. They were very afraid that it was going to come off as being too pagan, so
Ah.
he flavored it a lot with stuff to try to make it more palatable. But a lot of his sources are definitely spot on. He does reference the Poetic Eddas. A lot of this other stuff that he wrote is really good. Another good book, which I think I have here, if you really want to if you really want to get into the history of the Vikings themselves, Snorri also wrote, which I have a copy, but it's a slog, the Heimskringla, um, and it's a collection of sagas that recount the legendary lives of the ancient and early medieval Norwegian kings.
Mm.
Um, so if you want to know more about how the societal structure worked, and the political structure, that's a really good way to understand kind of what was going on in these people's minds.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing. Um, does that make you excited for Assassin's Creed Vikings, or do you feel like Assassin's Creed doesn't really
Love
adapt?
Assassin's Creed.
Okay.
Um, like they they do more work on it than like they get credit for, I
Mm.
think. Especially Odyssey. Odyssey was really fantastic.
My favorite
And
Assassin's Creed.
I loved the kind of story-ish mode where you could just walk around and go to all the landmarks and get basically a history tour.
Yeah.
Um, I wish every game set in a historical place would just do that. Like, here, let's have the virtual tour section. Um, and on your left, you'll see, like that would be amazing. And 'cause if you're gonna render all this stuff, and they rendered it beautifully, why not educate your audience? If they want to know what it is, why should they have to go anywhere else to get that information? You obviously have it. You can share it, and I think it was very smart of them to offer that. I spent hours doing that. It was so much fun.
Yeah. Those are great games. And what do you do with all this information generally? Like, do you just chat with people, like kind of like you're doing now, except we're actually recording? It's actually gonna go on my channel. So if Santa Monica Studios like discovers you and Corey Balog emails or hits you up in the comments and he's like, "Hey, come work for Santa Monica," would you do it?
Oh, I totally would. I do some creative research and stuff. I'm trying to break a little bit more into that field, but I have worked on a couple of projects in the indie games industry. Um,
I remember you telling me
I
that.
I love when someone wants to bring that to it, rather than because there's something to be said for inventing a lore and a mythology yourself. But everything that we're going to invent, we're basing it on stuff that we've already heard of, that we've already associated with certain aspects. If you're going to have gods and goddesses who have things that they're associated with, we're basing that on something. It doesn't just come out of nowhere.
Right.
Same thing with fairy tales. There's a lot of stuff in fantasy that we kind of just take for granted. I noticed that a lot with people who play things like The Witcher, where there's a lot of rich folklore and fantasy. And it's like, yeah, okay, we're gonna have to get rid of this ghost, so we got to dig up the bones and burn them. And we just kind of go, okay, but we don't think about why.
Right.
And there is a why. There is a clear reason why that is what we're supposed to do. So when people want to know stuff like that, I'm usually the one that like some of my friends come to. It's like, hey, how exactly does this work? Um,
Yeah, I thought a lot about that when I was playing Sekiro, and there's that moment where, like, a little bit of spoilers for Sekiro, where you're fighting the guardian ape, and all of a sudden, after you think you kill him, he like reanimates into this like headless undead creature, and you fight a bunch of headless creatures throughout the map, and that's like Japanese folklore that I had no idea
It
about until
is.
someone informed me of it. And I'm just like, yes, From Software, let's go. Like usually you play their games and there's lore, and probably deeper than deeper than I imagine, because like I don't study this stuff or read into this stuff like you do. But I'm sure you playing those games, you would be like, oh, I know where that's from.
Yeah, like whenever and I love when a lot of like Asian horror games make use of hair, because that's such a visceral thing too. Whenever you see stuff like that, and that's got a lot of deep folkloric ties as well. And people just see it and it looks creepy, and they're just like, ah, that's creepy. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
no, it's worse than that. It's creepy for a whole bunch of other
Oh my
reasons.
God. I could have a whole podcast with you about just that, the hair that you mentioned. Like thinking of so many like games or movies that I've seen that like focus on hair that are like,
Asia knows how to do horror, man.
oh God,
Like,
yeah.
they really know how to handle it. Um, and I am liking the resurgence of cosmic horror styles that we're seeing in video games from Bloodborne onward. The Call of Cthulhu tabletop game has become more popular. Um, I especially in these times where we're all like stuck at home and we want to play games with each other.
Yeah.
Everybody's turning to Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. Um, I'm looking forward to seeing if this if nothing else comes out of this, people's imaginations might get stirred while they're stuck at home.
Nice.
Maybe we'll get some really good creatives making some cool stuff in their basement, you know?
Oh, absolutely. There's gonna be so much coming out of this quarantine.
Definitely. There's already been a lot of wonderful art. The art community, I have a lot of friends that I went to theater school with, who they all had careers, and then everything went like bottoms up, and they started creating a lot of content online,
Yeah.
and they're getting noticed still through that. So
Thank
there's
goodness.
always an outlet for people.
That's great. Is there anything you wanna plug? Like, I don't know if you're into, like, social media, Twitter or whatever, or if you, like,
I've
have
got
a
all
place you write blogs or anything.
I've got just about all the socials.
Cool.
But and I can definitely like give you that if you want to add that onto the video, that's cool.
Yeah, you can send me links and I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, I've been told that I should write a blog or that I should do videos or
Yep.
something. Um,
Agree.
yeah,
Hard agree.
I I am so terrified by it, but I think if I was ever gonna try, this is probably the time. To just start creating some content and like get it out there, because I've learned really through this that I'm not the only person who's interested in this. A lot of the game devs that I talked with when the game first came out, and they of course finished it because they were just like playing it nonstop. I'm like, I got a day job. I come home and I'm tired.
Yeah, totally.
um, but they were just like going like full ham. Like they finished it in a week, and I was like, you guys are nuts.
Yeah.
Um, but I said, well, you finished it, so all right, let me propose this to you. I say that this and this and this and this are going to happen. And they were like, how? What? But you just said you didn't like that you just started. I'm like, yeah, but I think this is going to happen. And they're like, okay, okay, yeah, it's going to happen. How'd you do that? And it shocked me how like people really it like you said, the education is coming from comic books
Yeah.
and movies, and how many people really like didn't get this stuff covered for them when they were kids. Like we're lucky if we learn the Greek mythology as like classic literature in school. Um, and they don't really cover anything else. And this is people's culture. This is people's lives, really. They
We'd be
lived by this.
we'd be better off learning about that than American history. The
Yeah,
way they write
I
it.
mean, the way they write it, man.
Yeah.
I actually had a book because I was homeschooled, which is also why I was allowed this like broader, I think, scope of education, because I was just home all the time, surrounded by all of these things that I could learn from, and
A
my
lot of parents are
folks knew
probably
how to
doing that
tap into
now.
that.
Look at what could
Yeah,
be created. A Ryan
man.
Cahill
I
could
mean,
be created.
yeah, exactly. You could have a bunch of crazy weirdos like me. Isn't this the picture of what you want your children to be?
I would want my child to be like that for sure.
Oh, you're too cute. Thank you. Um, but I got a really good education on these subjects that a lot of my friends who were going to public school and even private school didn't get. So they were starting to like ask me questions about stuff, and I thought it was so bizarre. That's my mother in the background. Um,
The woman who made this happen.
the woman who made this possible. Um, with the patience of Job, because I was a precocious little monster. Um, but yeah, she's the one that stoked all of this. If she hadn't started reading those books to me when I was a kid, I would not have grown this infatuated, really obsessed, I think is the better word. um, I think Strand in the city has a magnet that says "I am a book hoarder," and then they cross off hoarder and write collector. um,
Yes.
that is me. I have like these two books are just like, this doesn't even touch.
I bet.
I probably have like somewhere between like 2 and 500 books
Nice.
on mythology and folklore and all that stuff. It's a problem, but I I read them all,
I
and
think it's
I'm always finding
beautiful.
new things.
I learned so much from you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like I'm leeching all of this valuable information without having done any of the legwork myself. And I mean, I'm also sharing it to other people. So I hope that it reaches others
Someone's got
because
to
this
do the
is,
legwork. So
yeah.
if everybody was doing that legwork, then like trust me, y'all wouldn't have a life. So I'll do it
Right.
for you, and then I can tell it to you.
Thank you so much. And do you wanna, or if you can, or even care to talk about any of the like indie games that you worked on? Or do you prefer to keep that
Um,
private?
they're still in they're still in development, so I
Okay.
can't elaborate
No
really.
doubt.
What I can say, I can say one, what the title is. It's going to be a product by Moon Studios,
Oh.
which I believe they are based out of New York. But a lot of the team is like all over the place. And that project is going to be called The Worst Grim Reaper.
Ooh.
Um, and it's actually quite adorable. It's been demoed at a couple of events, notably where I actually met the guy and got brought on to the team was at Play NYC. um, and that's a wonderful, wonderful venue. They did it virtually this year, of course, but they're a wonderful community, the playcrafting community and International Game Developers Association. Um, Wonderful people, and they've really they've really pulled through with all of this. And they made a quick jump to virtual everything. um,
Great.
and they're all still out there. They're still creating. That's the best thing about this, is that you can just sit at home at your computer and
Yes.
you can still work. So they've been doing really well.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. All right. Well, I think that that wraps it up unless you have something else to add.
I say we'll do this again. I would love to do
Yeah,
this again
totally.
on another another subject, either elaborating more on this or talking about a different game. Um, I I would definitely like to do this more. If people like it, then let's just keep doing it. It's not like I'm going anywhere. So
Well, even if they don't like it, I like it, so I'll selfishly do it for myself.
Exactly. You you guys are gonna sit and listen because I want to hear this. Yeah.
Exactly. That was great. So thank you all for watching / listening to this wonderful, weird episode that I've never ever thought I would be doing, that I'm happy I'm doing. It was kind of like us having dinner again at Mom's, except we had to do it virtually, unfortunately, and it
And
was
there was
just
no ice cream.
and no ice cream. Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, that fruit. Oh
Oh
my
my
God, that
god,
Fruity
wasn't that
Pebbles
so
fucking
good?
shake. Jesus Christ. Oh God. Yeah. Good times.
Man, we're just gonna if God forbid they're closed, I'm gonna like knock all the wood that I can find right now because I want to go back there. But if not, then we're just gonna have to find a way to recreate that for ourselves
Oh
and just
yeah.
eat them because that was too good.
That was so that was
It was
sinful.
sinful. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Bye.